The rain battered the cobblestone streets of Charleston, South Carolina, a relentless gray curtain that mirrored the storm brewing inside Major Tessa Whitlock. She stood in her army dress blues, the silver oak leaf on her shoulder glinting under the chandelier of the Whitlock Manor's grand foyer. Her chest bore ribbons earned through 12 years of service, each a story of sacrifice, each a badge of honor. But to her step-aunt, Evelyn Marwood, they were nothing but a costume. "Wipe that parade ground smirk off your face, Tessa," Evelyn hissed, her voice dripping with disdain as she glided past in a black velvet gown. "You're just the hired help here." The words cut deeper than any blade, slicing through Tessa's pride as a decorated officer. She was no stranger to hostile territory. Afghanistan had taught her to stand firm under fire, but this was different. This was home, or it was supposed to be. The funeral for her grandfather, General Amos Whitlock, was meant to be a moment of grief, not a battlefield. Yet, Evelyn's icy glare and her cousin Laurel's cruel chuckle made it clear. Tessa was an outsider in her own bloodline. The air grew heavy, the scent of Evelyn's rosewater perfume choking the room. Tessa's heart pounded, but her training held her steady, spine straight, eyes fixed on the rain-streaked windows. She wouldn't break, not here, not now. If this story of courage against betrayal speaks to you, hit that like button, drop a comment, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories that dig deep into the human spirit. The Manor's oak-paneled walls seemed to close in as mourners gathered, their whispers sharp like shards of glass. Tessa felt every glance, every muttered judgment from Evelyn's clique of Charleston elites. Laurel, her cousin, leaned toward her mother, her voice a venomous whisper. "Look at her, playing soldier at a funeral. It's embarrassing." Tessa's jaw tightened, but she held her ground, her boots rooted to the polished floor. She remembered her grandfather's words from a summer long ago, when she was just a girl learning to fish on his dock. "Tessa, courage isn't just for war. It's for when the ones you love turn their backs." Those words were her anchor now, keeping her from drowning in the hostility. A flicker of warmth broke through when Senator Harlan Brooks, a grizzled friend of her grandfather, approached. His eyes softened at her uniform. "Major Whitlock, Amos was damn proud of you," he said, his handshake firm. "He told me about your missions, your medals." For a moment, Tessa felt seen, her service validated. But Evelyn swooped in like a vulture, her smile all teeth as she steered the senator away. "Oh, Harlan, let's not bother with Tessa," she purred, her voice sweet poison. "She's just a distant cousin, here to assist." The word assist landed like a slap, stripping Tessa of her rank, her identity, her place in the family. The senator hesitated, glancing back, but Evelyn's grip was iron. Tessa stood alone again, the foyer's grandeur mocking her isolation. The day wore on, the rain outside unrelenting. Tessa's mind churned, replaying Evelyn's words, Laurel's laughter. She was no stranger to discipline, to holding steady under pressure, but this was a different kind of war. The enemy wasn't across an ocean, it was here, in the house her grandfather built. As mourners drifted to the dining hall, Tessa lingered, her gaze catching on a framed photo of General Amos, his stern face softened by a rare smile. She could almost hear his voice. "Hold the line, Tessa. Always hold the line." She straightened, her resolve hardening. This wasn't just about surviving the day. It was about reclaiming her place. Then, a quiet figure approached, Jasper Klein, the family's attorney, his face etched with exhaustion. He pressed a sealed envelope into her hand, his eyes flickering with something unspoken. "From Amos," he whispered. "Read it alone." Before Tessa could respond, a young woman, Clara Holt, Jasper's assistant, slipped beside her, her movements quick, almost furtive. She pressed a small USB drive into Tessa's palm. "The General's last order," Clara murmured, her voice urgent. "Don't let them see." She vanished into the crowd, leaving Tessa clutching the drive, its cold metal heavy with secrets. The rain outside roared louder, as if urging her to act. Whatever was on that drive, whatever was in that envelope, Tessa knew one thing. The fight for her grandfather's legacy and her own truth was about to begin. The air in the Whitlock Manor's library was thick with the scent of old leather and polished mahogany, a room that once held General Amos Whitlock's quiet wisdom, but now pulsed with predatory tension. Major Tessa Whitlock stood rigid, her army dress blues a stark contrast to the black silk and tailored suits of her relatives. The rain outside Charleston's historic district pounded the windows, a restless drumbeat echoing the storm brewing within her. Evelyn Marwood sat in a high-backed chair, her posture regal, her eyes glinting with barely concealed disdain. Beside her, Laurel Marwood and her husband, Gideon Holt, a slick Charleston real estate magnate, lounged with the smug confidence of vultures awaiting a feast. Tessa's heart thumped, but her face remained a mask of disciplined calm, honed by years in war zones. She wasn't here to mourn anymore. She was here to face whatever blow was coming. Jasper Klein, the family's attorney, cleared his throat, his hands trembling slightly as he adjusted his glasses. The room fell silent, every eye on the leather-bound folder in his hands. General Amos's last will and testament. Tessa felt the weight of Evelyn's stare, sharp as a blade, daring her to flinch. Jasper's voice was steady, but carried a gravity that made the air heavier. To my sole granddaughter, Major Tessa Whitlock, he read, I bequeath the entirety of my estate. The Whitlock Manor, all its holdings, the full contents of the Whitlock Trust, valued at $12 million, and my 42% controlling shares in Palmetto Enterprises. The words landed like a grenade. The silence that followed a deafening explosion. Evelyn's face twisted into a mask of fury, her manicured nails digging into the armrests. Preposterous, she shrieked, surging to her feet, her voice a raw, jagged edge. Amos was out of his mind. Senile. Gideon's jaw dropped, his polished veneer cracking, while Laurel's delicate features froze in a stunned grimace, her wine glass trembling in her hand. Tessa stood unmoved, her boots planted on the Persian rug, but inside, her mind raced. $12 million, the manor her grandfather built. Control of Palmetto Enterprises, a sprawling empire of coastal real estate and shipping. This wasn't just an inheritance, it was a declaration of war. Evelyn's eyes burned into her, promising retribution. You, she spat, her voice dripping venom. A glorified errand girl? This is a mockery. Tessa's pulse quickened, but she recalled her grandfather's words from a long-ago training session in the Carolina marshes. Power isn't given, Tessa. It's taken, and you hold it with steady hands. She met Evelyn's gaze, her own eyes unyielding, and said nothing. Silence was her weapon now, a disciplined refusal to engage on their terms. The room erupted into chaos. Gideon barked at Jasper, demanding legal loopholes, while Laurel whispered furiously to her mother, her words laced with panic. Jasper, unflinching, handed Tessa the sealed envelope from the funeral, his eyes holding a flicker of respect. It's yours, Major, he said softly. All of it. Tessa's fingers closed around the envelope, its weight grounding her amidst the storm. She caught Clara Holt, Jasper's assistant, watching from the doorway, her expression unreadable but urgent. The USB drive from the funeral burned in Tessa's pocket, a ticking bomb of secrets she hadn't yet dared to explore. As Evelyn stormed out, her heels clicking like gunfire, Tessa knew this wasn't the end. It was the opening salvo. She left the manor under a sky still heavy with rain, her beat-up Chevy pickup rumbling through Charleston's historic streets. The envelope and USB drive sat on the passenger seat, their presence a quiet challenge. Tessa pulled into a nondescript motel on the city's outskirts, the kind of place where neon flickered and no one asked questions. The room smelled of stale coffee and damp carpet, but it was hers, a sanctuary from the manor's venom. Sitting on the edge of the lumpy bed, she stared at the USB drive, her heart pounding with a mix of dread and resolve. Whatever secrets it held, they were her grandfather's final gift, a map to a truth her family wanted buried. The rain outside softened to a whisper, as if holding its breath. Tessa plugged the drive into her laptop, the screen flickering to life. What she found would shatter everything she thought she knew, and light the fuse for a battle that would either destroy her or set her free. The motel room's fluorescent light buzzed faintly, casting stark shadows across Major Tessa Whitlock's face as she sat at the chipped Formica desk. The rain outside Charleston had slowed to a drizzle, but the storm inside her was just beginning. Her laptop screen glowed with the contents of the USB drive Clara Holt had slipped her at the funeral, each file a jagged piece of a puzzle she hadn't known existed. Tessa's heart thudded, her military training kicking in. Observe, assess, act. But nothing in her years of decoding enemy intel in Kabul had prepared her for this, a betrayal woven into the fabric of her own family. The USB, marked only with Amos, final, held folders labeled with clinical precision, estate, palmetto, legacy. Each click revealed a deeper wound, a conspiracy that threatened to unravel her very identity. Her grandfather's voice echoed in her mind, steady as ever. Truth is a battlefield, Tessa. Fight for it no matter the cost. She took a breath, steeling herself for what she was about to uncover. The first folder, estate, was a digital vault of treachery. Emails between Evelyn Marwood and Gideon Holt laid bare a years-long plot to siphon Tessa's $12 million inheritance through a sham charity, the Patriot Fund, cloaked in noble rhetoric about supporting veterans. The words burned. Gideon's smug promise to handle the soldier girl if she dared claim her due. Evelyn's chilling reply that Tessa's existence is a stain on the Whitlock name. Each message was a dagger, twisting deeper into Tessa's sense of belonging. She scrolled, her jaw tight, until an audio file stopped her cold. It was Clara Holt, her voice trembling but resolute, recounting how Gideon fired her after she stumbled on evidence of his funneling Palmetto Enterprises funds into offshore accounts. He threatened to ruin me, Clara whispered in the recording. Told me I'd never work in Charleston again. Tessa's fist clenched, her anger a slow-burning fuse. This wasn't just greed, it was cruelty, calculated and cold. Then came the folder labeled Legacy, encrypted with her grandfather's birth date, a code Tessa cracked in seconds, her fingers shaking. Inside was a single image, grainy but unmistakable. A young Tessa, barely 5, laughing on a sunlit lawn at Fort Jackson, South Carolina. Beside her, a soldier in an 82nd Airborne uniform, his arm around her, his smile warm and protective. The caption read, Captain Elias Boone, 1997. The truth. Tessa's breath caught. This wasn't the father she'd been told about, a faceless Air Force pilot lost in a training crash. This was a paratrooper, a hero, erased from her life. Her family had lied, burying Elias Boone's memory to protect their pristine legacy. The room spun, the motel's cheap walls closing in. Tessa's world, built on the story of a tragic but honorable loss, crumbled into dust. Who was this man? Why had they hidden him? Her phone buzzed, snapping her back. A text from Clara. Check your email. Urgent. Tessa opened her inbox to find an encrypted message with a single line. They know you have the drive. Be careful. A chill ran down her spine, not from fear, but from clarity. Evelyn and Gideon weren't just fighting for money. They were fighting to keep a secret that could destroy them. Tessa's mind flashed to the envelope from Jasper Klein, still unopened on the bed. Whatever was inside, it was another piece of the truth her grandfather had died to protect. She stood, pacing the small room, her boots scuffing the worn carpet. The USB's files were a map, but to where? A corporate conspiracy? A family shame? Or something darker? Something that tied her father's erasure to the millions they'd stolen? Outside, a car's headlights swept across the motel's parking lot, lingering too long before pulling away. Tessa's instinct screamed. Someone was watching. She closed the laptop, her pulse steady despite the danger. Years of training had taught her to face threats head-on, but this was uncharted territory. The USB was a ticking bomb, and she was running out of time to defuse it. Her grandfather's words rang again. Truth is worth the fight, Tessa. She grabbed the envelope, her fingers brushing the wax seal of the Whitlock crest. Whatever came next, she'd face it as a soldier, not just for herself, but for the father she'd never known and the legacy they tried to burn away. The glass tower of Palmetto Enterprises loomed over Charleston's skyline, a monument to wealth and ambition that gleamed under the morning sun. Major Tessa Whitlock stepped through the revolving doors, her navy blue pantsuit crisp as a uniform, her boots replaced by sleek heels that clicked with purpose on the marble floor. The USB drive and her grandfather's envelope were tucked in her briefcase, their secrets fueling her resolve. She'd spent the night in her motel room, piecing together the conspiracy, Evelyn and Gideon's theft of her $12 million inheritance through the Patriot Fund, the erasure of her father, Captain Elias Boone. Now, she was here to claim what was hers, not just as an heir, but as a soldier facing a new kind of enemy. Her grandfather's voice echoed from a long-ago drill. Take the high ground, Tessa. Always. Today, the high ground was the boardroom on the 40th floor, and she was ready to seize it. A burly security guard blocked her path in the lobby, his smirk as deliberate as a jab. Visitors' areas that way, ma'am, he said, pointing to a corner of plastic chairs where couriers scrolled their phones. The slight was calculated, a message from Gideon to keep her in her place. Tessa's pulse quickened, but her face remained a mask of calm. She met his gaze, her voice low and steady, like giving orders in a war zone. I'm not a visitor. I'm the owner. The guard's smirk faltered, his eyes narrowing. She didn't budge, standing firm in the center of the lobby, her presence turning heads. Whispers rippled through the polished space, employees, visitors sensing a showdown. The air crackled with tension, a silent standoff that felt like the calm before a firefight. The elevator chimed and Clara Holt emerged, her face pale but determined, a file folder clutched tight. She nodded at Tessa, and the guard stepped aside, his bravado crumbling. They rode to the top floor in silence, the hum of the elevator mirroring Tessa's steadying breaths. The boardroom doors swung open to reveal Gideon Holt at the head of a mahogany table, his tailored suit and smug grin a fortress of arrogance. Flanked by nervous executives, he radiated control until he saw Tessa. "What the hell are you doing here?" he roared, his voice echoing off the panoramic windows overlooking Charleston's harbor. Security. Tessa ignored him, striding to the table's head with the precision of a parade march. She placed her briefcase down with a deliberate thud, pulling out the legal portfolio from Jasper Klein. Per Palmetto Enterprises bylaws, Tessa announced, her voice clear, cutting through the room like a blade. A shareholder with over 40% of the company's stock may preside over any meeting at any time. She locked eyes with Gideon, watching confusion flicker into dread. He hadn't expected this, a direct assault on his power. "My 42% gives me the right to command this meeting, Mr. Holt." The executives froze, papers rustling, eyes darting. Gideon's face paled, a sheen of sweat betraying his panic. He'd thought he could outmaneuver her with legal tricks or intimidation, but Tessa was no longer the soldier girl he mocked in emails. She was a force, wielding her grandfather's legacy like a weapon. Clara slid a tablet onto the table, displaying the Patriot Fund's fraudulent transactions, millions funneled into Gideon's shell companies. Whispers erupted among the board, their loyalty to Gideon wavering. Tessa leaned forward, her voice dropping to a low, intense pitch. "This isn't just a seat at your table, Gideon. It's the end of your game." The room went still, the weight of her words sinking in. She turned their fortress into her battlefield, and the tide was shifting. But as she left the tower, a shadow lingered, a black SUV idling across the street, its tinted windows hiding watchful eyes. Tessa's instinct screamed danger. The USB's secrets had cracked open the conspiracy, but Gideon and Evelyn wouldn't surrender easily. Back at the motel, she found her door ajar, the lock scratched. Someone had been inside. Her grandfather's words rang again. "The high ground comes at a cost, Tessa." Whatever that cost, she was ready to pay it, but the fight was far from over. The Charleston dusk settled over the city like a heavy shroud, the air thick with the scent of salt and impending rain. Major Tessa Whitlock's boots crunched on the gravel of the motel parking lot as she approached her battered Chevy pickup. Her triumph in the Palmetto Enterprises boardroom still pulsed in her veins. She'd seized control, exposed Gideon Holt's fraud, and watched his smug facade crack. But the victory felt fragile, like a ceasefire before a counterattack. The USB drive's revelations about her father, Captain Elias Boone, and the stolen $12 million inheritance weighed heavy, each truth a landmine in a war she hadn't chosen. As she neared her truck, a flash of white under the windshield wipers stopped her cold. It wasn't a ticket. It was a page from her grandfather's sealed letter, the one Jasper Klein had given her at the funeral. The edges were scorched, the ink smudged, but she could still make out Amos's words. "Your strength is my pride, Tessa." The paper trembled in her hands. The burn marks a deliberate message. This wasn't just a warning, it was a declaration of war from Evelyn and Gideon, a promise they could destroy her as easily as they burned her grandfather's words. Tessa's heart pounded, but her training kicked in, her eyes scanning the lot for threats. The black SUV she'd noticed outside Palmetto's tower was gone, but the shadows felt alive, watching. She slipped the scorched letter into her pocket, her fingers brushing the USB drive. Her weapon, her proof. Back in her motel room, the door's scratched lock confirmed her fears. Someone had been inside, searching. The room's stale air felt suffocating, the hum of the cheap air conditioner a mocking reminder of her isolation. She sat on the bed, the letter's charred edges searing her mind. Evelyn and Gideon weren't just fighting for money. They were fighting to bury the truth about her father, about her. The USB had exposed their fraud through the Patriot Fund, but this act of vandalism screamed desperation. What else were they capable of? Her grandfather's voice cut through the haze. "When they push you to the edge, Tessa, that's where you find your strength." She opened her laptop, the USB's files a labyrinth of betrayal. A new email from Clara Holt waited, marked urgent. They're moving money again. Check the Patriot Fund's latest transfers. Tessa's fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling up bank records Clara had hacked from Palmetto's servers. Millions were shifting through shell companies, each transaction a thread in Gideon's web. But one detail chilled her, a transfer dated yesterday, hours after her boardroom coup, to a private security firm known for less than legal tactics. Were they hiring muscle to intimidate her? Or worse, Tessa's pulse quickened, but fear was a luxury she couldn't afford. She texted Clara, "Meet me at the diner. We need a plan." The response came instantly, "On my way. Stay sharp." The motel's neon sign flickered outside, casting jagged shadows through the blinds. Tessa packed her essentials, laptop, USB, the unopened envelope from her grandfather, into her duffel. She couldn't stay here. The scratched lock was a warning she wouldn't ignore. Driving through Charleston's quiet streets, she headed for the Delray Diner, its red vinyl booths a safe haven from the storm. As she parked, her phone buzzed with an unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. A gravelly voice rasped, "Major Whitlock, you're stirring a hornet's nest. Watch your back." The line went dead. Her grip tightened on the wheel, her mind racing. Was this a Palmetto insider? A hired thug? Or someone else? Someone tied to the mystery of Elias Boone? Inside the diner, the smell of frying bacon and coffee grounded her. Clara slid into the booth across from her, her face pale but resolute. "They're escalating," Clara whispered, sliding a printout across the table. A contract with the security firm, signed by Gideon. Tessa's jaw clenched. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was personal, a vendetta to erase her and her father's legacy. The scorched letter burned in her pocket, a reminder of the stakes. She leaned forward, her voice low. "They want to fight, Clara. They're about to get one." The diner's jukebox kicked on, a haunting country tune filling the air. Tessa's eyes met Clara's, a silent pact forming. The war was heating up, and the next move was hers, but the shadows were closing in, and time was running out. The Delray Diner's neon glow cut through the Charleston night, its red vinyl booths a refuge where Major Tessa Whitlock could breathe, if only for a moment. The scorched letter from her grandfather, its edges blackened with Evelyn Marwood's malice, lay on the table beside a half-empty coffee mug. The USB drive's revelations, Gideon Holt's embezzlement through the Patriot Fund, the erasure of her father, Captain Elias Boone, had turned Tessa's world into a battlefield. The anonymous call warning her to watch her back still echoed, a chilling reminder that Evelyn and Gideon were playing a dangerous game. But Tessa wasn't alone anymore. Across from her sat Clara Holt, her eyes fierce with defiance, her decision to quit her job at the law firm a bold stand against the family's corruption. I'm with you, Major, Clara said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. Amos gave me a chance when no one else would. Now it's my turn to fight. Tessa's chest warmed, a flicker of hope in the suffocating darkness. For the first time, she felt the stirrings of a true family, not bound by blood, but by loyalty. The diner's jukebox hummed a soft blues tune, grounding the moment as Tessa leaned forward, her voice low and urgent. They're hiring private security, Clara. That contract you found, it's not just intimidation. They're scared. Clara nodded, sliding a thumb drive across the table, a backup of the Patriot Fund's illicit transactions. This is everything I pulled before they locked me out of the servers, she whispered. Bank records, emails, even a memo from Gideon to Evelyn about neutralizing the threat. That's you, Tessa. The words hit like a punch, but Tessa's training kept her steady. She'd faced ambushes in war zones. This was no different, just closer to home. Her grandfather's voice rang clear. Family is who stands with you when the bullets fly, Tessa. Clara was her squad now, and the fight was personal. As they spoke, the diner's bell jingled, and a grizzled figure in a worn 82nd Airborne windbreaker stepped inside. Sergeant Roy Callahan, one of General Amos's old paratrooper brothers, scanned the room before locking eyes with Tessa. He slid into the booth, his weathered face etched with purpose. Heard about your boardroom stunt, Major, he said, his voice a low rumble. You've got their attention and their fear. Amos would have been proud. Tessa's throat tightened. His words were a lifeline, anchoring her to her grandfather's legacy. Roy leaned in, his eyes sharp. We've been digging. Got a lead on Elias Boone. He wasn't just some name they buried. He was one of us. Tessa's heart skipped, the mystery of her father deepening. Roy slipped her a folded note with an address. The Airborne and Special Operations Museum in Fayetteville. Meet us there tomorrow. We've got your six. The weight of Roy's words settled over her, a promise of brotherhood forged in battle. Tessa glanced at Clara, who gave a small nod, her resolve mirroring Tessa's own. They were a unit now, bound by a shared mission to expose the truth. But the danger was closing in. As Tessa stepped into the parking lot, the black SUV from earlier idled across the street, its engine a low growl. She froze, her hand instinctively brushing the concealed holster at her hip. The vehicle peeled away, but the message was clear. Evelyn and Gideon were watching, their hired muscle circling. Tessa's motel room was no longer safe. She'd need to move, and fast. Clara followed her to the truck, her voice urgent. We need more than files, Tessa. We need proof that sticks, something they can't burn away. Back at the motel, Tessa packed her duffel, the scorched letter a burning weight in her pocket. She opened her grandfather's envelope at last, revealing a handwritten note. Tessa, the truth about Elias is your shield. Find it, and you'll find your strength. Her eyes stung, but tears were a luxury she couldn't afford. The museum meeting with Roy's paratroopers was her next move, a chance to uncover her father's story and maybe more. As she drove through Charleston's quiet streets, the city's charm felt like a mask hiding the vipers within. The USB's secrets, Clara's loyalty, and Roy's promise were her arsenal now. The war was escalating, and Tessa was ready to strike. But the shadows were growing longer, and the enemy was closer than ever. The federal courtroom in Charleston was a crucible of tension, its polished wood and high ceilings humming with the weight of anticipation. Major Tessa Whitlock sat at the defendant's table, her army dress blues immaculate, the medals on her chest gleaming like silent sentinels of her honor. The pews were packed, reporters scribbling furiously, Palmetto Enterprises executives shifting nervously, and in the back, a row of weathered paratroopers led by Sergeant Roy Callahan, their 82nd Airborne windbreakers a quiet testament to loyalty. Across the aisle, Evelyn Marwood and Gideon Holt sat with their high-priced lawyer, their faces a mask of smug confidence. They believed this defamation lawsuit, filed to silence Tessa's claims to her grandfather's $12 million estate in Palmetto's control, would crush her. But Tessa had the USB drives damning evidence. Gideon's embezzlement through the Patriot Fund, Evelyn's plot to erase her father, Captain Elias Boone. Her grandfather's voice echoed from a long-ago Carolina dusk. When the enemy thinks they've won, Tessa, that's when you strike. Today she would. The prosecution's lawyer, a sharp-suited man named Victor Crane, launched into his opening, painting Tessa as a vengeful soldier, unhinged by combat, fabricating stories to extort her family. He twisted her service record into a weapon, suggesting PTSD drove her to invent a father and a conspiracy. The paratroopers in the back stiffened, their silent rage palpable. Tessa sat still, her hands calm in her lap, letting Crane dig his own grave. Clara Holt, beside her, whispered, "They're overplaying their hand." Tessa nodded, her eyes on the American flag by the judge's bench. This wasn't about defamation, it was about truth. When the judge called her to speak, Tessa didn't take the witness stand. She stood center court, her voice ringing with command. "Your Honor, this is a criminal investigation, not a civil dispute." Clara tapped her tablet, and the courtroom screen flared to life. The first slide showed emails between Evelyn and Gideon, their contempt for the soldier girl laid bare. Their plan to funnel $12 million through the Patriot Fund to shell companies exposed. Gasps rippled through the gallery. The next slide traced the money trail, bank transfers, offshore accounts, all leading to Gideon's name. The Palmetto board members whispered furiously, their loyalty crumbling. Then came the knockout, a high-resolution image of a $60,000 Tiffany receipt, signed by Laurel Holt, paid with a corporate card from a shell company tied to the Patriot Fund. Gideon's face drained of color, sweat beading on his brow. Evelyn gripped the table, her knuckles white, her composure fracturing. Tessa let the image linger, the silence deafening. "These crimes," she said, her voice low but carrying, "are a symptom of a deeper rot, a family that buried a hero's legacy to protect their greed." She held up a file, her hand steady despite the fire in her chest. "This is the DD 1300 casualty report for Captain Elias Boone, killed in action saving General Amos Whitlock." Her voice trembled as she read from Amos's journal, his anguish raw. "Evelyn forced me to hide Elias's name to protect our standing. I've lied to my granddaughter, and it breaks my heart." The courtroom was silent, the air thick with shock. Tessa turned to Evelyn, her eyes burning. "You didn't just steal money. You stole my father's honor." Evelyn snapped, lunging to her feet, her face a grotesque mask of rage. "You and your pathetic father were a mistake," she screamed. "I made sure he was forgotten." The confession exploded, cameras flashing, reporters scrambling. The judge's gavel cracked like thunder. Once, twice, 3 times. "Order," he bellowed, but the damage was done. Evelyn was escorted out in cuffs, her screams echoing. Gideon sat frozen, his empire collapsing. The paratroopers in the back stood taller, their eyes shining with pride. Tessa felt no triumph, only a hollow clarity. The truth was out, but the cost was a family shattered. As she left the courtroom, Clara squeezed her arm. "We did it, Major." Tessa nodded, but her mind was on the envelope's final secret, a note hinting Elias Boone might still be alive. The fight wasn't over. Someone was still watching, and the shadows held one last truth she had to face. The National Mall in Washington, D.C., shimmered under a crisp autumn sky. The Vietnam Veterans Memorial, a somber stretch of black granite etched with names of the fallen. Major Tessa Whitlock stood at its edge, her heart pounding as she scanned the crowd. The courtroom victory had shattered Evelyn Marwood and Gideon Holt's empire. Evelyn in custody, Gideon arrested, their fraud through the Patriot Fund exposed. But the greatest revelation was still unfolding. A letter, delivered days ago to her Charleston motel, had turned her world upside down. Written in a soldier's steady hand, it read, "Tessa, they said my existence endangered you. I believed them, but I never stopped watching over you. It's time to meet. Your father, Elias Boone." Her father, Captain Elias Boone, wasn't dead. The lie that had shaped her life, a pilot lost in a crash, was a fabrication to erase his heroism. Now, Tessa was here to reclaim him, her pulse a drumbeat of hope and dread. Her grandfather's voice whispered from a Carolina dawn, "Family is who you find when the lies fall away, Tessa." She spotted him first, a tall figure by the wall, silver threading his once dark hair, his posture unmistakably that of a paratrooper. Elias Boone's hand rested on the granite, tracing names with a reverence that spoke of decades of loss. He turned, sensing her, and their eyes met. His were the same warm, crinkled eyes from the 1997 photo, now heavy with regret and love. "Tessa," he said, his voice breaking, thick with 30 years of silence. Words she'd rehearsed, questions, pain, accusations, dissolved. She crossed the distance, her steps unsteady, and fell into his arms. He held her tightly, his hand cradling her head, and the weight of a lifetime's loneliness melted away. The memorial's quiet power enveloped them, a sacred space where truth finally stood unburied. Tessa wasn't an orphan, wasn't a burden. She was home. Weeks later, Tessa stood at a podium in the National Press Club, the room buzzing with journalists and lawmakers. Beside her sat Elias, Clara Holt, and Sergeant Roy Callahan's paratrooper brothers, their faces weathered but proud. Tessa's voice was clear, resonant. "My grandfather, General Amos Whitlock, left me an inheritance, but his true legacy and that of my father, Captain Elias Boone, isn't in wealth. It's in truth." She announced the liquidation of Palmetto Enterprises, its assets funding the Boone-Whitlock Foundation for Veterans Truth, offering legal aid to those whose stories, like her father's, were silenced. The crowd murmured, cameras flashing. Elias's eyes shone with pride, mirroring Amos's words from his journal. "Your courage is my redemption, Tessa." She'd fought for her father's honor and won, building a legacy that would outlast the greed that tried to destroy it. As she spoke, Tessa's mind drifted to the journey, the scorched letter, the courtroom confession, the allies who became her family, Clara's loyalty, Roy's unwavering support, and now Elias's presence had rebuilt what Evelyn and Gideon tore apart. The foundation wasn't just a mission. It was a promise to every veteran betrayed by lies. Tessa glanced at her father, his hand steady on hers, and felt a peace she'd never known. The war was over, but its scars were her strength. She ended her speech with a vow. No truth will be forgotten again. The room erupted in applause, but Tessa's heart was with the quiet moment at the memorial, where she'd found her father and herself. The lights of Washington, D.C., glittered beyond the press club's windows as Tessa and Elias stood together. The city's pulsed a quiet backdrop to their shared silence. The battle had been brutal. Evelyn's venom, Gideon's greed, Laurel's betrayal, but it had forged something unbreakable. Tessa looked at her father, his face etched with lines of sacrifice, and smiled softly. "Amos would be proud of us," she said. Elias nodded, his voice thick. "He always was, Tessa, especially of you." Across the room, Roy and the paratroopers raised their glasses, their salutes a silent oath of loyalty. Tessa felt the weight of her grandfather's legacy, not as a burden, but as a beacon. She'd reclaimed her father, her truth, and her purpose. The Boone-Whitlock Foundation would carry that forward, ensuring no veteran's story was erased. This wasn't an end, but a beginning, a dawn after a long, dark night. If Tessa's journey moved you, if her fight for truth and family resonates, please share your own story in the comments below. Your voice matters, and you're not alone. Like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more stories of courage and redemption. Let's keep these truths alive together.